Okay, so this is how 360score.me works. We start off with a very simple import of your user list, and all we need to know is a list of your users and who they report to. You'll see here that Mei Ling reports to Bill Gates and Dan Roberts and Ed Leped report to Mei Ling. Simply because of that proximity in the org chart, that is incredibly important to us on 360score.me to be able to evaluate the weightings of these individuals when they score each other. So Dan Roberts and Mei Ling will have a 100% relationship with each other. Same thing with Ed Leped and Mei Ling. By default, Ed Leped and Dan Roberts will have a 50% weighting with each other. So their scoring of each other will count half as much as the score of Mei Ling and vice versa. Other individuals in the organization, for example, this Amanda Sorens, they are further away in the org chart from these individuals. And so by default, in smaller organizations, we will give them a weighting of 10%. So the weighting of Amanda Sorens of Mei Ling, for example, will be 1/10 the weighting that Dan Roberts will have of Mei Ling. In larger organizations, we set the default weight for these distant people in the org chart to 0. However, these are all just defaults. You then come down here and can customize for individuals, remember Amanda Sorens, the weights with every other individual in the organization. So you'll remember she's a couple of notches away from Bill Gates, so by default she has a 10% weighting. However, we can change that. Let's say they really do work together a lot, almost like they're direct reports. We can make this weighting a 100%. Let's say Amanda is an intern, and in this scenario, we want her to be rated by Bill Gates, similar to somebody who directly reports to Bill Gates. However, we don't want her rating of Bill Gates to count as much as a senior person. So here, each one is individually set. For weights for ratings from Amanda Sorens, we're going to put this down once again to a 10. And weights to Amanda Sorens from Bill Gates will be a 100. So this customization supports matrix organizations or very complicated organization charts that may go beyond just your traditional setting. So now that we know how everyone works with each other in the organization, now is when we can set up a survey and figure out what their opinion is of each other and what the reputation of people is in the organization. The way that we do that is by setting up a survey. And by default, these are the questions that we provide. You can have these questions go only to folks who are direct reports, remember the 100% weighting, or maybe you want to have them to teammates as well, where it's a 50% weighting. Anyone that has a weighting above a 0 will get a survey about the other individual. Anyone who has a 0, those individuals will not show up on their survey at all. Let's say, for example, in this case, we don't want the indirects, people who are 10% or anything less than 50%, to get these additional questions. They will get the survey, but they will only be able to give a 360 score for that individual. You also have a self-evaluation survey, which you can select right here. So this way, we will have the ability to give ourselves a self-evaluation, so that way we can compare it against the scores that we get from other folks. Now that we have a survey set up, we schedule it to go out periodically using a certain threshold of how many weeks you want to send it. Once that is configured, a survey goes out. A survey looks something like this, where you are grading individuals on this grading scale. We have separate presentations on how important this grading scale is, but we use the traditional grading scale that people are familiar with the letter grades of A to F. And so it's very important that people use this the way that it's intended. Average is not an A+ or an A. Average is a C. If that is done, you will find that the scores that your individuals receive will be pretty close to the actual reputation they have in the organization. Generally, these questions end up being not far off from the score that people give on the 360 score. You provide additional color in these comments and submit the actual review. Once you've submitted the review, the next individual comes up and you score them. Then all of that comes back to administrators. And initially, they go only on to the supervisor view. This is where you get to see what the tabulated scores are across your organization. This is their reputation. This is what their coworkers think of them. Self-evaluation, for example, we have a self-evaluation here for Bill Gates. This is ego. This is what they think of themselves. So it's good to compare what people think of themselves versus what people everyone else in the organization thinks of them. And we feel reputation, which is what others think of you, is something that's out there whether you measure it or not. This, however, now makes it actionable for organizations. But specifically, what makes it even more actionable is the additional color that you get. So remember those additional questions? We now have those responses broken out based on the scores, the weighted scores from your coworkers. So we know Clay needs to work on his reliability, but the other things are incredibly strong. But then the true gold is in these comments. And these, once again, are only effective if people trust anonymity. If you do not have an anonymous platform, not only will these be overly positive, but they will be filled potentially with fluff. And so in order to get the real radical candor out of the organization, we need to have this anonymous system. So you will see the comments, but you will not see who they are from. And supervisors will have an ability to upvote or downvote these comments to say whether they're helpful. This then goes back and rewards the individuals that shared the comments by giving them a high contributor score. This is how we encourage people to be coaches, everyone to be a coach within an organization and provide valuable feedback. This is, once again, only data that is available to the supervisors, meaning this is an ability for them to compare what their own supervisor score was, the manager score, in relation to the score that everyone else gave. Then this is shared with them by using what's known as a 360 report. This is now the first time that the data that has been accumulated will be shared with the actual individual. This is the supervisor's ability to go in and potentially review, in particular, the comments, but perhaps you don't want to share some of these other items. You can always untick them and not share them. The comments in particular are what we are conscious of. You want to make sure that there's no bullying in here. You want to make sure there's nothing unproductive or comments that are not helpful in the realm of planning or career coaching that you have for the individual. That's why we want the supervisors to review this and edit this before it is shared with the individuals. So that way we can make sure that this is valuable information for growth for the individual that can be used in quarterly one-on-ones or annual or semi-annual reviews. This is additional material that they can use. And with it, we give them awards for things like being a top responder and contributor, which encourages them to remain engaged with future surveys. This then we can share with just for ourselves as a draft, or ultimately share it with Laura's other supervisors or with Laura herself. Once we post this report, this is the first time that they will be able to view this data and hopefully make it actionable in their lives and their career. So that's 360 report. Hopefully you guys find it useful. Thanks so much.